takes place. That's entirely different than the known laws of physics that have been tested and verified to be true today, like, for example, the first law of thermodynamics. So is it your contention that you're putting your hope and faith in some yet undiscovered scientific principle that will render the conservation of energy law and the first law of thermodynamics moot? Is that your contention?
Of course not, for several reasons. One,
Okay.
that I don't hold that position whatsoever. Secondly, I would wonder why you invited me if you want to talk about the theory of nothingness. I was wondering why you wouldn't talk to Lawrence Krauss in this instance, because I can discuss evolution all day, but if you want to talk about cosmology, that's another matter.
No,
Now,
I want to talk
Lawrence
about God's
Krauss,
existence. I want to talk about God's existence and why you believe that there is no God. And I asked you, if there is no God, where did everything come from? And your answer to me was, well, throughout history, there's been different things that we thought was metaphysical, and it turned out there was a scientific explanation we just didn't figure out yet. That was the answer you gave. So then I'm asking you, so in other words, you're saying that there's some scientific principle that will allow for matter and energy to be created out of nothing, and you're saying we just haven't discovered that yet. I said, is that what you're proclaiming? And you said no. So I guess I'm back to my original question. Then how do you believe, as an atheist, everything got here?
The concept of nothing is kind of rendered impossible at this point. And like I said, I listened to a wonderful lecture by Lawrence Krauss where he explained nothing 4 times. He did very, very eloquent explanations. However, it was a bit beyond me, and the only thing I can take away from that, as I've said a couple of other times, is that I am confused by nothing, and Krauss understands nothing, and I think that's about the most positive way I can put that. In my own terms, I would say that if we have an expansion of the universe and the details or the data that we see is accurate, then we have an origin of the universe that seems to match a Cartesian coordinate system wherein you have a time represented by an asymptote where 1 second equals infinity when t equals 0. In this interpretation, since time begins with the Big Bang, what you would have is simultaneously an origin and an eternity in one. Now, to put it another way, the preference that I have, dealing that I don't have astrophysical math, I would say that if we have gravity being represented as a depression on a sheet of plane, like the time-space continuum, the fabric of space-time, and you have a ball, you roll another ball around it of lighter weight, and you see how the depressions are made, how they bend the fabric of space-time. A black hole is supposed to be a actual hole in space-time. Now, how that's represented in our dimension is impossible to understand. But with the origin of the universe from a Big Bang singularity would have to be a greater degree of intensity of that. But again, that's completely outside my field. The only thing that I feel relatively secure in is that it's not going to be, the explanation for this is not going to turn out to be anything anthropomorphic, anything that seems to match anything that came from Bronze Age tribal traditions that are very limited in location and history.
Okay, well, let's do this. Hang on just a moment, because we're going to a short break. We'll pick it up from there. And we don't have to go deep into cosmology. I mean, we had Victor Stenger on the show, and him and I spent quite a while on conservation of energy laws and quantum physics, and we don't need to go there. I'm fine with that. But I do want to simplify this, because there is a simple question as to determining, is the God scenario more plausible to believe in, or is the no God scenario more plausible to believe in? I would argue intellectually it's very binary, and the universe came together by one of two means, either through a God scenario of some type or a no-God, strictly naturalism scenario. And which of the two are most plausible and logical for people to believe? You, as an atheist, have chosen the atheistic view as more plausible. I'm trying to figure out why, and also trying to explain why I believe the God scenario is the more plausible scenario. So hang on just a moment. We'll pick it up from there in just a couple of minutes more with AronRa. His website, atheists.org, of course, American Atheist, and you're listening to The Bob Dutko Show. Bob Dutko Show. Continuing our discussion with AronRa. He is the Texas Director for American Atheists. He's a well-known atheist, a blogger, has produced one of the most popular atheist sites on the web, over 70,000 subscribers. And we're talking about whether God exists. And so, Mr. Ra, I want to simplify this as the point I was making toward the end of the last segment. No, it's not my intention. We don't have to try to discuss the intricate details of scientific cosmology and such. There's a simplicity to this. And I know this sounds all technical scientific for the audience, but conservation of energy law within the first law of thermodynamics, it's very simply this. You need to conserve the amount of energy that exists. So however much energy there is, energy can be converted into matter, matter can be converted into energy. But however much total stuff there is, you can never have a total increase or a total decrease. It has to stay the same. So, all the matter and energy that exists in the universe right now, according to known scientific law that's been tested, and retested. And Victor Stenger, as you know, and I referenced him earlier, he's a PhD astrophysicist. He's a brilliant man. He's also an atheist, and I debated Dr. Stenger on this as well. He doesn't even deny the reality of the first law of thermodynamics and the way that it works. So of all the matter and energy in the universe right now, according to the known laws of physics, if there is no God, the no God scenario, that means all of this matter and energy would have had to have existed for all time, or it would have had to have come into existence at some point. And the problem is neither one of those two scenarios are possible according to the known laws of physics in the no God scenario. So I would argue by process of elimination, the God scenario then therefore must be considered more plausible. Your response?
Well, my response, first of all, is that where you said neither is plausible, I actually held and explained that both are simultaneously true.
Okay.
And while we may not know that how both happened or how either happened, what you're saying is that when we come to anything that we don't understand, you're going back to my first point, you make the assumption that it was something equivalent of a genie speaking magic words, abracadabra, which is Aramaic for I speak things into existence, abracadabra, a genie poofs things out of nothing. Now, the problem is, in science, you don't have anybody proving there is no God, like we said before. You have only what is supported by evidence and what is not supported by evidence. And so you are positing that there is a magical anthropomorphic entity that consciously evokes things and for which there is no evidence, for which there is no explanation, and which is inconsistent with everything we've explained so far. And the worst part about that is it's not the complete lack of any indication of such a thing. And the claim that this magical entity exists is so wholly preposterous, beyond being, as I said, the most primitive of men's excuses. How does this happen? Well, it must have been magic. It must have been people like us who did these sorts of things. And then you just add on the magic powers to the people like us. But you have a situation wherein all the claims for theology, all of them, lie in either two categories: unwarranted assumptions that have never been justified, and positive claims which have been disproved.
Yeah, well, let me address that if I could, okay? Because you say that what I'm believing in is some magical genie who says abracadabra and things come into existence. And, of course, you're referring to my belief in God. I believe that there is an entity that exists in the universe that operates outside of the laws of physics, that does not have to obey those laws of physics and therefore is capable of violating them and creating matter and energy from nothing, okay? I would argue that that's much more logical than your conclusion, sir, which is basically the universe came into existence not because there's a God who said abracadabra and it came into existence, but that nobody and nothing somehow said abracadabra and whoosh, it all came into existence. So what I'm putting to you is, I would argue, if you're going to hold on to atheism, you need to give me some logical, plausible, and scientific reason to believe that matter and energy can come into existence from nothing. And you know that you can't show me any scientific basis for believing that. So why are you willing to believe that that happened?
Because you and I are both coming from a position where both of us have something that is unexplained. and you're making the assumption that if science does not explain it, then magic does. But magic does not. Neither of us knows how the universe came into being. The difference between us is that I have to base my perspective on evidence, and I can posit nothing until positively indicated. You make an assumption, unwarranted and unjustified, that there is a magical entity that is not indicated, and you're going to posit that this thing exists, supported wholly by mythology that we know to be wrong, supported entirely by claims we now know to be false, or
let me address
which
that.
are perhaps not testable claims, but also not justified. They're not vindicated. They're not indicated.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll tell you, let me address what you just said, because you said that we both believe something that's unexplained. All right? I'm with you there.
No, I'm not talking about belief. I'm not talking about belief. We both have a phenomenon.
That we cannot explain in a tangible way. I can't present God to you right now on a silver platter, and you can't create for me a universe on a silver platter. So
but there's more to it than that.
I understand it, but what you're doing is you're taking my position, and you're saying that I'm there. No, hold on a second. You're taking my position, and you're claiming that I'm therefore choosing to believe in something unwarranted and unjustified, like a belief in God. But I'm turning it around on you, Mr. Ra, and I'm saying, aren't you equally believing in something that is unwarranted and unjustified because you are believing by faith that somehow the universe just came into existence on its own in violation of the laws of physics? You say you need evidence, okay? The evidence is this. The first law of thermodynamics has been verified, and re-verified to be a law of physics. You can't make something out of nothing. It cannot be done. This has already been tested and proved ad nauseum. So you're believing somehow that that happened anyway. So why don't you consider that belief of yours unwarranted and unjustified based on known scientific law?
Because I don't have a belief, as I already told you. And I said earlier on, if the data is correct, then this is what it indicates. And how do we explain that? We don't know. That means I do not have a belief. I have a tentative grasp on the data, and I have the assumption that the data is correct, perhaps, and could be flawed. I don't understand cosmology, as I said, so I'm not making a conviction. You, conversely, are making a statement of conviction. You believe in an entity that is not indicated. I believe in what is indicated, and I will change my mind when it is not indicated.
Okay.
This is how I have a non-faith-based position.
Okay, and in
all
fairness.
Position,
okay, but in all fairness.
Which has two flaws.
All right, but in all fair. Okay, well, hold on just a second. In all fairness, okay, because you're saying I'm the one with the belief system and you're not. But right. I have to respectfully disagree with you. I know you can claim you don't have a belief system, but the problem is this. As a self-described atheist, that means that you believe there is no God. Now, you're saying, well, I can't know that for sure. Okay, fine. But you tend to come down on the side of the fence that if you had to bet money, if you put your chips somewhere, you would put your chips on that there is no God. So you're assuming that that is the most plausible of the two options to believe. You are, in fact, believing that, but you're doing this in violation of the laws of physics. That's the point I'm making to you.
Wrong.
But where am I wrong?
We both believe. No, wrong. I'm following what the data indicates, and I expect that with all the things that they've been finding with, matter popping in and out of existence on a quantum level, if you have this vast rift in time-space, then you have something outside the universe that's bleeding into the universe through this rift in space-time. Perhaps that's one explanation. I have a phenomenon that is not explained, and I honestly call it unexplained. You have the same phenomenon, which is as yet unexplained, and you call it explained by a thing which you assume for no reason, and which you will maintain that assumption against all reason because yours is a position of faith. And there's several flaws with that. As I said, in science, there is only what is supported by evidence and what is not supported by evidence. And since gods are not supported by evidence, then you cannot posit them. In acting as a scientist cannot state that such a thing likely exists until he has evidence to imply that at least the circumstances are favorable.
Okay, but you got to remember what I said.
You certainly cannot say.
Go ahead. I'll just finish your point.
You certainly cannot say that something actually does exist unless he has positively indicative evidence. And if he does say these things, then he would be considered a fraud. However, when a religious person makes the exact same kind of claims, then the word fraud equates to revealed truth.
All right.
Even though all the theologians disagree with each other.
Here's the problem with everything that you just said. It violates and contradicts what I said at the opening of this interview. I stated at the very beginning, I'm fully aware of the fact that I cannot technically, empirically prove to you that God exists according to the standards that you are looking for, just like you cannot prove that the universe came into existence on its own somehow in a no-God scenario. What I'm saying to you is that you say you want to base your opinions based on the data. What you have done is you have concluded the most plausible thing to believe, and I know you don't want to use the word believe, but I just respectfully, I think it's a semantics game. I think you're kidding yourself. You have chosen to believe that the no-God scenario is more plausible of an explanation for the existence of everything. What I'm telling you is, if you use the data, the scientific data itself, it is already proven you can't create energy out of nothing. You can convert energy into matter and vice versa, but you cannot create it out of nothing. The mere fact that it does exist now is, in fact, empirical data. We have scientific data showing that we have a three-dimensional universe consisting of energy and mass. It is here. So it got here somehow. And if you choose to believe that it got here on its own, what I'm telling you is, from my perspective, you are denying the empirical scientific data that you can't create something out of nothing. This is a simple, basic law of physics, and your no-God conclusion violates that law of physics. At least my God conclusion is consistent with the law of physics, because God doesn't have to obey the laws of physics. He can operate outside of them, so the laws of physics are intact. You're basically rendering them moot. That's why I say my position is actually more scientific. Now, hang on a second, because I want to give you a fair chance to respond, but we are going into a short break, so we'll pick it up in just a couple of minutes. More with AronRa 2 minutes from now. You're listening to The Bob Dutko Show, continuing our discussion with well-known internet atheist AronRa. He is Texas Director for American Atheists. We're talking about the existence of God. And, all right, Mr. Ra, I know we're kind of becoming gerbils on a wheel about the creation of the universe, so I do want to move on to some other areas. But first, I want to give you a fair chance to respond to what I was saying before the break. And I suppose this is just coming down to a fundamental difference of opinion about what it means to have a belief in something. I respect the fact you're denying that what you have regarding atheism is a belief system. I would argue that it is. And so just to recap, and I want to give you a fair chance to respond. If I'm using the laws of physics, and the laws of physics clearly...
Can I just jump in on this for a moment? Can I just jump in on this for
a moment? Sure, go right ahead.
You had control of the whole thing. You said, if you're saying this, and if you believe that, and if you think these things, then you're in violation of all. But I don't say that, and I don't believe that, and I don't think these things. So I've been misrepresented for 15 minutes.
Well, then let's address it. You say that you're an atheist. You say you're an atheist,
I'm an
right?
atheist.
Okay, so you do not believe there's a God.
That means that I do not pretend to know things that no one can know. I don't assert things that are not evidently supported.
Okay, do you?
I have argued
all right, then I'll tell you what, we'll make it. We'll make it.
Wait. I have argued against Big Bang cosmology. With cosmologists, I got my ass handed to me because I didn't like the theory, and I've had to concede that, hey, with the data that's given.
By the way, Mr. Ra, I did have to. Did it work? I did have.
Oh, what?
Please, we are Christian radio, and so I'm going to ask you to please try to refrain from that language. But go ahead.
I wasn't aware that I said anything wrong.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's okay. We hit the delay and we got it out. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's a simple rule as far as the way I conduct myself. I do not posit what is not indicated, and when there's an explanation that is not available, where there's a phenomenon that needs to be explained, and I don't have an explanation that I can show to be accurate, I say I don't know. I don't say I know something until I can show that what I know is actually factual, is actually supported. Otherwise, if you can't do that, then you don't actually know it. It doesn't matter your level of conviction. You don't know until you can show that the information is correct. So what I have to base my conclusion on is we have the claims of science, which I can show many things. I mean, you can choose maybe a couple things we need an explanation for that aren't really areas of my specialty. And you can dance around all there, telling me what I supposedly believe about these things and not be accurate. But if we look at the data of whose claims are accurate, we have the claims of theology, which exist in two categories. One, things never been indicated and are not justified by that. And two, beyond the things that are simply not justified, we have the positive claims which have been tested, which are testable, and which have proven to be wrong. And then we have, and that's it. And that's the whole entirety of that aspect.
All right.
And then we have my side.
All right, good. Very quickly on your side, and then I want to get a chance to respond, and then I do want to move on. So go ahead.
And then on the side of science, we have things that we can prove, which are in direct contest with the Bible. Like, for example, when people argue that humans did not descend from apes and birds did not descend from dinosaurs, when by systematic classification, humans are apes and birds are a subset of dinosaurs. So how can you argue against that? We have where we can show that our conclusions about evolution, for example, are correct. And we can't answer everything, but every answer we do have, science has produced.
All right. Let me
Creationism and theology has never answered a single
Okay, let me address what you're saying, because I'm going to discipline myself not to be pulled down into a rabbit trail. I would love to have a discussion with you on, like, for example, the dinosaurs, and cite for you the evidence that the evolutionary theory regarding dinosaurs has been proven wrong by history and by science itself, much of which I'm quite sure you're not aware of. Oh, I would love to have that. Trust me, I would love to have that conversation with you as well. But in all fairness, if you're talking about trying to validate the Bible as it relates to creationism and evolution, that has nothing to do with the central question of whether, in fact, there's a God. That's putting the cart before the horse. If you concede that there is a God, then the next step is to determine how is that God revealed. Is he revealed through the Bible, or is he revealed through Christianity or different religions or whatever? Who is that God becomes the second question if you concede the first question of whether there is a God. You don't concede that there is a God. And so that's my whole point here. When I talk about conclusions, when I talk about conclusions drawn, okay, you say, I can't know, there's nothing I can know. I didn't ask you if you
that.
Okay, what you said was there are things that you cannot know, all right? And so what I say to you is, okay, however you word it, I don't want to get into a semantics game because you're kind of splitting hairs now. When you say there are things we cannot know, and I'm with you on that, I said that at the beginning. My point to you is this, and it was the very same thing I said in the beginning. I didn't ask you to prove to me unequivocally, airtight, the no God scenario. I didn't ask you to do that. I asked you why you choose put the fence down the middle. You got the no God scenario on one side, and you have the God scenario on the other side. Why you choose to conclude that the no God scenario is, as I worded it, most plausible. All right. And I would argue that that is the position that you take, that no, we cannot know everything, but you consider that the most plausible side. What I'm saying to you is, I don't believe that that is plausible scientifically, because I'm using the known laws of physics to show that the no God scenario violates the laws of physics, is therefore not possible according to the known laws of physics, which becomes an argument for me to say the God scenario is the more plausible side according to actual scientific law. That's merely the position I've made. All I've asked you to do is to justify why you consider the no God scenario more plausible in light of scientific law. That's all I've asked you to do.
You haven't allowed me to do that.
I've attempted to. I've given you plenty of opportunity.
Yep. You will give me paragraphs misrepresenting my position. I give a sentence, and then you respond with another paragraph misrepresenting my position.
Did I misrepresent you as an atheist? Am I misrepresenting you when I say that you consider the no God scenario? When I say that you consider the no God scenario to be the most plausible of the two scenarios, is that a misrepresentation of your position?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, then tell me how that is misrepresented. I'm curious.
Okay. Let's entertain the possibility that a God, by something that is actually classified as a deity, and that's a whole other discussion, actually exists. Now, in order for me to grant that, there's another premise that we have to conclude first. What you want to talk about what we can't prove, let's first look at what we can prove and have proved. Okay? Now, I know you're going to pretend that you have evidence on your side, and you don't. And we can have a written discussion on this, and it can go on for months if you like, but you don't. And it's just flat out.
All right, I'm waiting to hear.
I can prove that humans are evolving apes, for example. I can prove a great many things about the evolutionary perspective. We can also prove a whole lot about the claims made in the Bible. So here's the thing. Whether a God exists in reality or not. In either case, evolution is still true and the Bible is still false. And not even the existence of God can change that, because those two things have already been demonstrated.
Okay. With all due respect, Mr. Ra, and I've debated a lot of people, and I know you have too, okay? What you are attempting to do, I'm not going to fall for. What you're attempting to do is basically you realize you've been backed into a corner with the existence of God. You cannot. No, hold on. Wait just a second, okay? Sir, let me hold on just a second. Hold on just a second, all right? Because I have Mr. Ra, listen. Hold on. Let me respond. Listen. Mr. Ra, I have allowed you, sir, listen. Listen to me a second. I have allowed you to make mocking and ridiculing comments about my God being a genie who said abracadabra, who I can think I have evidence for creation refuting evolution, but I don't. You can make, hold on a second. You can make these declarative statements, and I allow you to do that because I understand that's the perspective you come from. But when I make a declarative statement that you've been backed into a corner on a particular issue, suddenly you go crazy and you don't want to give me an opportunity to finish my point. So what I'm saying to you is this. Whether you want to admit it or not, you have been backed into a corner on the existence of God. And since you can, Mr. Ra, please. And since you can, Mr. Ra,
and it is not possible to back me into a corner.
Listen, this is the difference, okay? When you said, my God is a magical genie who said abracadabra, and when you said you have no evidence for creation whatsoever, I did not cut you off and go, oh, you cannot say that to me, but you cannot accuse me of that. You absolutely do not know that. I didn't do any of that. I let you complete your points. Well, so what I'm asking in response is for you to do the very same thing. When you got backed into a corner, not being able to explain,
get backed into a corner because I
once again, not being able to explain a plausible scenario for the creation of the universe from nothing. Since you can't do that, you're backed into that corner.
In the creation of the universe from nothing, and have already
what you're doing is saying,
I don't believe that.
What you're doing in response, sir. What you're doing in response.
Tell me that I believe that everything came from nothing. You're misrepresenting my position.
Notice what I accused you of earlier, and you said I didn't do that. But sir, you continue doing this right now, and my audience hears you. Okay, what you've chosen to do is since you can't,
I believe that everything came from nothing, and I told you that I do not. And so you're continuing.
And I've asked you to explain to me how the no God scenario is more plausible according to the laws of physics.
I tried to do that.
You cannot do that.
You cut me off to misrepresent my position.
You have not. Okay, and you can believe that if you want to, but I think the audience can clearly hear. I have not misrepresented your position at all. You've attempted to say, well, let me try to wiggle out of that, and let's get into a debate about whether the Bible's false and whether or not evolution is true. You're wiggling out of explaining.
What do you imagine I'm wiggling out of?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. You're wiggling out of explaining why it is more scientifically plausible to believe in the no God scenario as it relates to the creation of matter and energy in the universe in violation of the first law.
I invited you to have that conversation, and you wiggled out of it. You said, "Oh, yeah, you'd like to have that conversation."
I'm begging you to have that conversation. All right, okay.
You're not going to. You want to talk about something science can't explain, so that you can avoid the thing science.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you why. I'm asking you why the laws of physics make the no God scenario impossible, yet you're willing to consider that the most plausible thing to believe in. That's what I'm trying to figure out from you.
I told you, because religion explains nothing.
All right. Well, then let's do this. Hang on just a second.
We do have all come from science.
All right. Now, we are
and
up against the clock.
And the claims that are made by science with regard to evolution, for example, have proven to be correct, and I can show you many examples that are factually accurate. Whereas you cannot show me an instance where religion was ever right about anything.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Hang on just a second, and we'll pick up the conversation from there in just a couple of minutes. And by the way, I will give you an example, and we'll do that a couple minutes from now. More with AronRa. He is a well-known atheist blogger and 70,000 followers. He's kind of one of the big YouTube atheists, very popular. He's the Texas director for American Atheists, and we'll continue the conversation a couple minutes from now here on the Bob Dutko Show. You're listening to the Bob Dutko Show, continuing our discussion with AronRa. He is an atheist. We're talking about the existence of God. And so, Mr. Ra, obviously we are going to agree to disagree on whether I have misstated your position. I sincerely do not believe I have. I know that you claim that I have, and so we'll let the audience decide whether I have actually truly misstated your position. Well,
I am on record as arguing against the very position you tried to paint me into.
Okay, well, you know, and that's fine. And I want you to keep in mind the position, if you will, that I tried to paint you into is that in the God scenario versus the no God scenario, that you tend to consider the no God scenario the more plausible thing to believe about reality and existence itself, that you believe it's more plausible to believe there is not a God than there is to believe that there is a God. I do not believe that, based on your own words, that's a misstating of your position. So if you claim that it is, then we will just respectfully agree to disagree with each other. Now,
but when you categorize everything in the no God category, that's every possible imaginable explanation, and some that are beyond our imagination, which may also be the case.
I'm open for a third scenario.
Whereas you're juxtaposing these against an anthropomorphic being with magic powers, and it really is very genie-like.
Okay, well, and I appreciate the fact that you see it that way. I just, realistically, if there is a God, some type of an entity that created the universe, he would operate outside of the laws of physics. He wouldn't have to obey them. And so to me, it's more logical and plausible to conclude that since we do have matter and energy in the universe, that there must be a being capable of violating the laws of thermodynamics that can create all this stuff. That's the God scenario. The no God scenario says somehow it happened without an entity violating the laws of physics. And that's where I just do not consider that plausible to believe.
Through a number of hypotheses means that don't have to have a personality or an intellect behind them, and certainly weren't, that aren't supportive of the mythology of the Bronze Age.
Okay, you're talking about the nature of God. I'm not talking about the nature of God. I'm talking about the existence of God. You're talking about what kind of God he is. That's a completely separate discussion.
Right. And like I
beyond
said, when you talk
whether
about
he
my
exists.
perspective on the God the existence of a God versus the non-existence of a God, the first thing we have to do is decide what a God is. And according to the consistent definition of a God, it's something that could only have been imagined by men. If there was something that we thought was a God, then we have misdefined it to be a God.
Okay, well, and I would argue that in a strict discussion of atheism versus theism, that you don't have to get into what type of God is. Step one is there a God or is there not a God? And if you can conclude, and I would love it if you would swing over to the other side of the fence, say, it's more plausible to believe there's some type of a God, then the next step is,
but
let's
it's not
figure out who that
you
God
don't
is.
have any supportive. You don't have any supportive evidence. You don't have any reason to believe it. You're making declarations which aren't supported and aren't justified and can't be defended.
Well, see, I think you can because of what and now here's where we're kind of beating a dead horse. Because of the fact that we have the empirical evidence of science, we have matter and energy in existence right now, and we have a scientific law that says you can't create it from nothing. Therefore, there's something that exists outside of the laws of physics.
I've argued with Krauss on this point. I've actually argued with Lawrence Krauss over this very point.
Okay.
But I don't hold the position that he does, and you're painting on him. Now, he would hold that nothing cannot exist. And it's a wholly different position, that even in Big Bang cosmology. So really, you can't even, not even he's opposed to me, and not even he holds the belief that you're trying to paint onto both of us. And when you talk about the knowledge of the actual, facts of science, again, I have to go back to the claims that are made by all theology, which we can show are false. I mean, when you get into creationism, which is a religious extremism, and it argues against things that we know to be true, it's all too easy to prove it backwards.
Well, the problem is we don't know them to be true. I know that you believe we know them to be true, but I'm just saying to you that if you do not believe, hold on a second.
There are a number of things
if you do not believe, hold on just a second. If you do not believe that the universe, Mr. Ra, if you do not believe that the universe came into existence from nothing, do you then hold that the universe has always existed? All the matter and energy in the universe has always existed. Is that then the position that you hold?
again, you can't phrase it that way because of the way the question is worded.
How would you phrase it then? Phrase it however you would like.
As I said,
all the matter this goes back to my original question. Where did it come from? It's always been here, or did it come into existence? Which one is it? It's very simple.
What do you mean, which one is it?
Which one is it? Has it always existed, or did it come into existence? I mean, unless you got a third option, I'm open.
I described the asymptote, and I said it is actually both at the same time.
Okay, I'd like you to try to clarify that if you could, because I don't think anybody listening to this thinks that makes any kind of common sense according to the laws of physics themselves. How does it always exist, yet have not existed at one time?
Because time began with the Big Bang as well. And if you follow the asymptote, then 1 second equals eternity when t equals 0. So at the beginning is eternal.
Okay. That unfortunately, as I described, with there being a hypothesized rupture in the time-space continuum, you could have a flooding of all time, of all energy and matter and all of this into this universe from someplace outside. You're talking about a multiverse.
Could be. Now, again, I don't have a position on that because this requires me to make statements that I don't know myself. I would prefer to talk about things that I do know and can show, which you say that I cannot.
Well,
I can.
in all fairness,
and I would challenge you on the things that you say you can prove because I know that you cannot.
I can. Okay, I'll tell you what. I mentioned the dinosaurs. You want to talk about dinosaurs?
Okay.
You want to do that? All right, hang on. We'll do that a couple minutes from now. More with AronRa. Folks, the website is atheist.org. You're listening to The Bob Dutko Show. Listening to The Bob Dutko Show, kind of winding down our time with AronRa. He is a well-known and popular atheist blogger. He's the Texas director for American Atheists, trying about whether God exists. And, you know, Mr. Ra, I mentioned the dinosaurs thing because I know this is one of the key areas that Christians have been kind of mocked and ridiculed and laughed at. And, can you honestly believe, I remember in the 2008 election, who was the actor? Matt Damon, I think it was. He said, I want to know if Sarah Palin actually believes dinosaurs walk the earth with man. I want to know if she actually believes that. And so this is something we've been mocked and ridiculed for. And I tend to turn into the storm and say, oh, yeah, let's talk about it. The evidence is overwhelming that the evolutionists have it wrong in so many areas, and one of them that's glaring is the issues of dinosaurs. I can make it absolutely clear. The evidence is overwhelming that dinosaurs lived with human beings within just the last few thousand years. How would you explain that?
With the video series, there's a two-part video that I did on the 14th foundational falsehood of creationism, wherein I explored the various claims that were made by the falsified Peruvian Ica stones and by the sculpture of a pig that was misrepresented to be a stegosaurus and a number of other falsified things like that. But when we're talking about evolution and you talk about dinosaurs, I mean, I don't even want to get into dinosaurs to the point where I have to explain what a dinosaur is and what a dinosaur isn't and what the actual implications of that are. Because people, creationists tend to think that mosasaurs were dinosaurs and the plesiosaurs were dinosaurs, and they're not. And this is when they're arguing that birds are not dinosaurs and birds are dinosaurs. They are literally.
Okay, I respect the fact you believe that, but it doesn't change the fact.
That.
Okay, well,
I can prove that.
And actually, you can't. And by the way, I
can
prove
it. And it has already been done.
Okay, no, it has not been done. Those are the conclusions drawn by the evolutionists. But hold on there.
If you cited at the ninth foundational falsehood of creationism,
Mr. Ra, you made a claim. You made a claim, okay, that what you debunk are the Inca stones and a pig's head that was treated as
not a pig's head.
Not a pig. A pig that was treated as a what was it, a pterodactyl or something? What was it again?
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Okay. Oh, you're talking about the Cambodian jungle temple, aren't you? Okay. Which, by the way, you can call that a pig all you want to. You're kind of kidding yourself, because pigs don't have those stegosaurus plates up and over the back.
Except that those plates are part of the background imagery, and stegosaurus didn't have external ears.
It's nothing more.
Stegosaurus didn't have hooves.
Okay.
They didn't have ears.
It's
and
nothing
they didn't have
more.
Diminished
you know something?
pigtails.
Anyone you can claim.
Stegosaurus have great big tails
Mr.
with
Rob,
spikes on the end.
You know what, Mr. Ra, seriously, I'm trying to be respectful with you. I really am, okay? But it's just not going to work this way where I allow you to make a point, and then when I start making a point back, you don't like the third word I say, and then you attempt to talk over me. So I mean this respectfully.
I'm not misrepresenting your position.
I am not going to allow myself to be bullied by anyone, and that's what I would consider that to be. So I'm going to ask you to respectfully allow me to finish my points as I allow you to finish yours. I disagree with you that is an image of a pig. I would argue that is clearly a stegosaurus, but I don't even need to use. Mr. Ra, please. I don't even need to use
external ears.
Mr. Ra.
Stegosaurus don't have external ears.
Mr. Ra, I do not need to use the Cambodian jungle temple and from the Khmer civilization. I don't even need to use that. I don't need to use the Ica stones either. There's a whole host that I can use that you can take something like that and go, oh, whoever carved that stone in there made the ears look wrong or made the head too big or whatever. But now you're pinning it on the artist's accuracy as opposed to a clear imagery of a stegosaurus. But I could take both of those. I could take both of those examples. I could take both those examples and throw them away. And the Ica stones I don't use, but the Cambodian jungle temple, I think you're kidding yourself. But even if I gave you that and threw it away, there's too many. Mr. Ra, please. There's too many other countless examples of artwork, carvings, drawings, mosaics that are identical, that have the ears just right, okay, that have the head and the neck and the tail and everything else just right.
There isn't one you can produce.
There isn't? Oh, I suggest you look for them. Like, for example,
I suggest you tell me one that you will put yourself behind.
How about
you tell me, give me an example.
I'll tell you right now.
You give me one single example that you will announce on here that can be scientifically verified to be authentic and be a human, a pre-Columbian human representation of a dinosaur or whatever you want.
I can give you over 30 of them right now. I could give you over 30 of them. Let me give you, just one or two. For example, in the Arizona Historical Society, ancient swords were excavated near Tucson, Arizona. They were excavated in 1924. The swords are referred, by the way, on page 331 of the book Lost Cities of North and Central America. You can look it up for yourself. They have various artwork designs carved into them. One sword has an exact brachiosaurus carved into it. If you look at this, you can show it to anybody. It looks exactly like it came out of a Jurassic Park movie. The Arizona Historical Society owns the sword. You can look at that picture of the brachiosaur. There's nothing ambiguous about it at all. You can't say, the ears aren't right. Nothing along those lines. That's one of example of 30 of them that I can give you right now. I would encourage you to look that up. You asked me to give you one, that's one. If you want two, I'll give you two. You want three, I'll give you three. We could spend all afternoon as I go through those. I'm saying,
and then if I were to take this, let's assume for a moment, okay? Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to allow that on my blog at Ace of Clades on the Free Thought blogs, that I will begin a discussion wherein we can have people bring up what they know about these swords that you're talking about.
Right.
And let's pretend for a moment that dinosaurs continued to exist in North America before Columbus got here, or even after, and somehow nobody ever noticed.
No, they did notice.
How does that impact evolution at all?
It impacts evolution. It impacts evolution theory because they claim, as part of the evolutionary theory, that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, and that they're separated by modern humans by about 64.8 million years. And this is just one. This is just one. This is just one. I'm talking about dinosaurs as we see them represented in the museums and the fossil record today. The Brachiosaurus, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Stegosaurus, Triceratops. You know full well what I'm talking about. And so what I'm saying is, when you see not only the countless recordings in history and drawings of these dinosaurs, but also physical written accounts of dinosaurs as well by people like Marco Polo, Pliny the Younger, when you add to that carbon dating done on dinosaur bones, dating them only to be thousands of years old. When you add to that fresh yes, you can. Yes, you can. And they've been dated to be thousands of years old.
Carbon dating doesn't go back far enough.
I know. That tells you that the bones are not 65 million years old. That means that proves the dinosaur bones are not 65 million years old, because they should be absent of C14, right?
That is going to produce erroneous results.
No, that's not true at all.
You have to overlap have to overlap results that will produce accurate results, and you have to use more than one of them. You have to use several concordant ones just to show that the carbon dating doesn't work. You have several other concordant ones that align with each other.
Mr. Ra,
and that's how we know the carbon dating doesn't work.
I have bad news for you, okay? If the dinosaur bones are 65 million years old, then the carbon dating would be wrong. But if the dinosaur bones are not 65 million years old, you have to explain. You have to explain. Mr. Ra,
the other methods would be wrong,
Mr. Ra,
they're not wrong.
Mr. Ra, you are not giving me an opportunity to complete the sentences that I give you an opportunity to complete, okay? You have to explain why, for example, the University of Arizona's Department of Geosciences Laboratory of Isotope Geochemistry dated specifically on August 10th, 1990, carbon-dated C14-dated dinosaur bones, and guess what? They had plenty of measurable C14 in them, which you should know is not possible if those bones are over about 100,000 years old.
I didn't say it's not possible
the C14,
to accumulate carbon.
You should no. You're not. They didn't. Are you saying that this evolutionary laboratory simulated the C14 inside of it?
Of course, I'm not saying anything so ridiculous.
Okay, well then
we know that there's other sources for carbon, and that these are not going to be indicative of the age of the fossil when you have overlapping other means.
Okay, what you're doing is you're trying to come up with some explanation for how the C14 in there.
I don't have to come up with an explanation.
Yes, you do.
Because if you're going to, yes, you do. Because if you're going to, not even in my area of expertise.
If you're going to argue these bones are 65 million years old, then it falls upon you to explain why they still have C14 on them. It falls on you to explain why dinosaur bones have been found and uncovered, completely unfossilized, unpermineralized, fresh bones that you know would biodegrade and turn to dust in a matter of centuries or certainly thousands of years. How they survive millions of years. I'm sorry?
I actually know that hasn't.
That has not happened? Really?
I know
fresh dinosaur bones. Fresh dinosaur bones have not been found.
That's right. Unless you're talking about birds.
Okay, I'm talking about, no, not birds. I'm talking about actual dinosaur, the dinosaurs from the fossil record that we see recognized. My suggestion to you is to look up for yourself about the unfossilized dinosaur bones that were found that were recorded in the Journal of Paleontology, 1986-87 edition on pages 198 to 200, volume 61, number 1, written by evolutionary paleontologist Kyle Davies, or the journal Science on December 24th, 1993, pages 2020 to 2023, about the duck-billed dinosaur found in Montana that were fresh bones, not fossilized. Those are just two examples. I could give you several more if I wanted to.
Once again, I would invite anyone who has questions on these to review my blog, where I will have a discussion open on this topic. I will have links to where we will have the scientific verification behind the claims that you're making.
Right.
And I predict, without any immediate familiarity with everything that you brought up, I predict that it's going to fall in line with every other claim I've heard of this kind, where it will not be supported by science, where it does not actually make the claims that you would say that it does, and wherein there is not an instance of a unfossilized dinosaur bone.
Okay, well, and we can let people decide. I want you to keep in mind the sources I cited for you. Not one Christian source, not one creationist source, only evolutionary scientific sources like the journal Science and the Journal of Paleontology. So these are the only sources. These are the only sources that I cited.
Right.
But listen, Mr. Ra, it's been a very interesting and lively discussion. I enjoy stuff like this. Personally, I think it's good and healthy that a Christian and an atheist can kind of lay this stuff out on the table, mix it up a little bit, and try as best we can to keep it respectful, but hopefully end on a handshake. And I do appreciate your willingness to be with us today, folks. It's atheist.org on the web, AronRa. And Mr. Ra, I have no doubt that your subscribers will rip me to shreds, and that's okay. But I do appreciate you being with us today.
Well, thank you. I actually appreciate the invitation, although I hoped that we would actually be able to discuss some things. As I told you, I'm the wrong guy to talk about cosmology. I would talk about evolution. That field I got.
Well,
you would sound like you want to talk to Lawrence Krauss more than me, given the topic.
No, well, the idea here was to talk about whether there is a God. You're an atheist, and if you recall, we said we could talk about a couple of things. My producer submitted a suggestion saying we could talk about whether God exists Or we could talk about, because I know you're passionate about the separation church and state, or we could talk about separation church and state. Your people got,
the existence of God is a fine topic. We just don't have enough time for it. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, your people got back with my producer and said he's willing to talk about either one, but he would prefer to talk about whether there's a God. And I said, well, then okay, we'll talk about whatever he would prefer in those topics. And so that's what this was about. Is there a God or is there not a God? So, but Mr. Ra,
I just wish we had more time to dedicate to that because it is a great topic to discuss.
It is. It is a good topic. And Mr. Ra, I do appreciate your time, and I thank you for being with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care. You're listening to the Bob Dutko Show. Well, folks, you know what? Look, I welcome your email comments. You can email me, bob@crawfordbroadcasting.com.